Isn't this amazing? It's my favorite part because you'll see. Here is when she meets Prince Charming, but she won't discover that it's him till chapter 3. Hello, it's me, and that's from Beauty and the Beast, of course. Today I would like to make a video on how to be a princess during quarantine, or rather how to stay a princess during quarantine. Back when the quarantine had just started, I realized that yes, it's very scary and sad. However, a part of me felt that this situation makes me somewhat connected to my favorite characters and thought that it was a unique opportunity to be a Disney princess. I googled this idea because I thought it can't be that such an obvious idea only occurred to me. And I saw that no, that thought came to many people on Twitter, but they only talked about Princess Rapunzel. But I know Disney princesses pretty well. I wrote my master's thesis about them. So I know that isolation and Disney princesses go hand in hand. So I decided to research this topic a bit deeper and find out what can we learn about self-isolation from Disney princesses and look for some more inspiration and some new ideas that we can get from them. Під час цього карантину для того, щоб отримати більше натхнення і більше якихось ідей. And I would like to start from the middle, which would be Belle. She is the protagonist of the animated film Beauty and the Beast, the second princess of Disney Renaissance and the fifth of all Disney princesses. Her film is based on the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast, the first author of which is Barbeau de Villeneuve. But there are several versions of this tale, one of them is pretty long, and all of them seem to be darker than the film.
Вони всі, мені здається, похмуріші за мультфільм.
And because this fairy tale is kind of grim and is pretty different from the animated film, we won't talk about it today. We will only consider the latter. In this film, Belle deals with two kinds of isolation. The first kind is obvious, it's physical isolation in the Beast's castle. But there is also another kind of isolation which she faces even before she becomes his captive. Before all of this, she has to deal with loneliness. She lives in this town where she barely communicates with anyone, except for her father, except for the bookstore owner, who doesn't even talk to her that much and just mostly lends her books. Nobody understands her or even wants to try, and those who choose to seek her company are much worse than no company at all. And I think that because of this isolation, this social isolation, it might be a bit easier for her to survive this isolation in the Beast's castle than it would be to a person who is used to a more socially active life. So, how does she deal with that specific kind of isolation? The first answer is obvious. She reads. Actually, she reads all the time, under any circumstances. She likes to escape to the fantasy world from time to time, while being absolutely aware of what's going on in reality. But she does travel to this world of fantasy until this world of fantasy finds her and she finds herself in the Beast's castle where she has to remain captive. And I think that it is one of the reasons why it was easier for her to survive this isolation in the Beast's castle than it would be to any other person from that town, because she has read about such things, she found that interesting, and under different circumstances she would want to visit such a castle. Of course, not this way. Of course, she didn't want to lose her freedom, but I think that it is because she had some references to literature, she could find a bright side in this situation. And I think that it's what helps me and other people who find associations with their favorite characters. It could be Disney princesses, could be Count of Monte Cristo, I don't know, anyone. It's what helps me to deal with this self-isolation. So, cultural references, reading. Of course, everyone right now is saying that we should read a lot during the quarantine, but you don't always have the mood for this. But why? I guess it can be because you don't know where to start. You don't know why you read books. Even if you want to engage in self-education, you don't always know how to structure it. And I have my personal idea of what to do with that. I came up with it in the beginning of the year. I chose 11 books approximately of different genres that I have to finish until the year ends. And until I finish one of the books, I can't add another book to this list. But those 11 books approximately, I read at the same time because I don't believe that it's possible to only read one book at a time until you finish it. But what's very important is that those books are of different genres, and I chose them so that I wouldn't just read something that's familiar, something that I'm used to, something that I want to read at the moment. So it's one fantasy book, one history of Ukraine book, one book about religion, one book that's about writing books, one book about the history of art. So those are different books of different genres. I think that it can be pretty good advice. I recommend choosing from about 5 to 11 genres that you find interesting and read those books during this isolation and after it ends to add more structure, more challenge and more entertainment to this process of self-education.
Оцей процес самоосвіти під час карантину. Але, окрім цього,
Although it's a very obvious answer that you should read books if you want to be like Belle during this quarantine, but this answer is only obvious if you're a grown-up. If, however, you are a child, then the first thing you notice about Belle would probably be that she befriended furniture. And that's the second lesson we can take from this animated film. If you don't have real friends at the moment, you can make those friends from the materials at hand during this quarantine.
матеріалів, які у тебе зараз є під рукою під час карантину.
So you can take a piece of paper, preferably thick, watercolor paper will do. So you cut off what you don't need, better use normal scissors for that because manicure ones are too small. We will have to make a cone, so the thicker the paper, the more difficult it will be. We have to cut the paper off along the approximate line where this cone should end. I do it intuitively. We get an approximate triangle. Now we make a cone. We use glue. I prefer thin double-sided adhesive tape because it holds better, but glue stick would work as well. I prefer to put the glue on the inner side of the outer side, if you know what I mean, because otherwise it's hard to predict where this glue will stick. We make a cone and we get a base for our object, but it's not ready yet. We have to secure it. If anything, we can secure it later, much later, with transparent adhesive tape, but it doesn't look very good. We got the base, but it's uneven, so we have to edit it a little. In fact, it has to be smaller. I checked with proportions, it has to be smaller because, well, you'll see why. Now we take a new piece of paper and draw the face. I decided that today I will draw Hermione because I have already made Harry Potter yesterday. Hermione has long hair and we have to only draw the part of hair that is visible from the front, because we will have to put her head and the cone together, and it has to be done, you'll see, it has to be done realistically. Now we have to draw the part of her uniform which is visible from under the robe. That is why I choose to make Harry Potter characters, it's because their robes are cone-shaped already. But of course you can make other characters if you like, it's just that Harry Potter characters are the easiest to make. She has a red tie because she is a Gryffindor, but if you're making Luna, then the tie would have to be blue. So you draw the color of her shirt, her tie. Now we'll use paint. I use acrylic paint, black and a bit of yellow to mix with it, so that it won't be just plain black color, which would be incorrect. So we paint with our brushes. It's better not to paint many times over one spot, otherwise it will look like a mess. You should wait until the paint dries and then cover it again where you need to. These cone toys or dolls are very convenient because you can hold them like that while painting. And we get a nice robe. The only thing missing is the arms. We take a break to wipe the paint from the table. Now we will make the arms. I have already made them. I think there's nothing difficult. You just draw the arms, draw the hands from both sides, color it also on both sides. Of course, you can only paint on one side of the sleeve and then you have to let it dry until you paint on the other side. Again, it's better not to paint over the same spot too much. It's better to use quite thick paint to cover it on the first or second try. Now it's almost dry, but we have to cover it again where there are those spots that are not covered completely. Again, we should try not to paint over the same place over and over again. I'm not following my own advice here, but I'm trying. Now we wait for the paint to dry after we've colored both sides of the arms. While it's drying, I came up with this pretty amusing thing. I don't know what you think of transparent adhesive tape. I don't like it too much, but here I don't have much choice because the stick glue doesn't work here. I tried to tape the back of her hair to her head, so we add some volume to her head. Now we have to glue the arms on. Actually, I tried to be more creative in interpreting Harry Potter's arms. He holds a magic wand, but I decided to make it easier this time because with Harry it was harder to make the arms look even, with one of them bent and other straight. Actually, one of the Hermione's arms was supposed to be his, but I thought that it was too short and Harry Potter came out taller. So we have Hermione. That's why I said that you should draw and color her arms and hands on both sides, because you can see the inner side a little bit now. And so Hermione and Harry Potter are waiting to be our friends. And the third aspect of Belle's isolation is apparent from the title, Beauty and the Beast. It's about a situation where you're locked up with a person or a beast that is hard to be around. I'm not talking about really toxic relationships, rather about the common everyday conflicts that occur in isolation when you can't avoid each other. I may not be the right person to give such advice because my current isolation is much more resemblant of the one of Rapunzel's, but I still think that there are some objective lessons which we can learn from the animated film. First of all, I must say that it's fiction, and in real life such a situation would look completely different and require a very different set of actions. But in the animated film, some of the toxicity of this relationship is a bit neutralized by the fact that we understand the beast and can sympathize with him. What is it that makes us sympathize with him? I think that it's that he's very young. I mean, he became the beast when he was 11 years old because of the mistake that he made at the age of 11. He spent almost 10 years looking like a beast, and now he is almost 21 and he has fallen into despair. He spent half of his life not in his own body, And he is vain, so it's very important for him to be handsome. And in addition, the only thing that can save him from this curse is love, romantic love. And for this kind of love, appearance is pretty important, even though it's not the most crucial thing. So something very important was taken away from him, and the only way he can get it back is the way that requires the thing. And of course he's desperate, because he has spent the last 10 years in isolation, and now we can imagine a bit better what it must have felt like. And he doesn't have any idea of what to do and how to help it. And when Belle comes to his castle, he understands. Here, this is my last chance to be safe. And he can force her to stay, even against her will, or he can make her agree to stay there. But what he can't do is make her fall in love with him. And she can't force herself to fall in love with him either, even if she wanted to save him. And because he had become a beast, even inside during this time, and he understands that he has to change, but every time he tries to communicate normally and fails at it, he feels desperate and frustrated, and this anger, this rage, he takes out on everyone around him, including her.
Кожен раз, коли він намагається нормально спілкуватися, і у нього це не виходить, він відчуває все більше відчай, все більше роздратування. І цей гнів, цю лють він зриває на всіх навколо, в тому числі на ній.
And what does she do in this situation? Two things. First, and it sounds a bit strange, is that she knows and feels that she doesn't deserve this attitude. Usually when people find themselves in relationship where they are treated badly, they start to feel that that's what they deserve. Well, because if it's all you get, then you start thinking maybe it's right, otherwise they would treat you differently. But Belle hasn't been in this situation for too long yet, and she understands that no, that's his problem, his rage. And she knows that it's not her fault that he treats her like that. And I think that she understands that he is bad at controlling his temper. She understands it, but she doesn't justify it. And that's why she doesn't really let him see his behavior as normal. I can't say that she doesn't let him treat her this way, because we can't control the actions of other people towards us. But in many cases, we can establish what is normal and what's not. So she reacts every time he breaks those boundaries, and she lets him understand that it's not okay. And because he needs her, because he knows that he has to change, because he needs her to love him, he listens to her. Of course, had the situation been different, she would have to act differently.
Вона було зрозуміти, що це ненормально. І оскільки йому вона потрібна, оскільки йому дуже потрібно змінитись, йому потрібно, щоб вона полюбила його, то він дослухається до цього.
It's about the high standards of communication, and they're much easier to uphold in a usual everyday life than in such an extreme situation as in that story.
Це цього набагато легше дотримуватись, ніж в такій екстремальній ситуації, як це було в мультфільмі.
So she sets these standards, and not only sets them, but she does uphold them herself. She has very high culture of communication, so it's not like she demands him to behave some way she doesn't behave herself. So she has these really good manners and reacts when he breaks these boundaries. The other thing she does is that she knows where to show her sophisticated manners and where to be flexible. I am, of course, talking about that moment where they're having breakfast. Their relationship has improved a bit. It was after he had saved her from the wolves, but I think before he gave her a library. And they have a served table, and he tries to eat with a spoon, but he can't, because he is a beast. And even though he has become much kinder, still it's one of the situations that make him hate himself and make him feel awkward and frustrated. And she sees it, so she starts to drink her porridge from the bowl. And it all instantly gets more fun and simple. I think it's a very touching moment because it's important to understand that your demands to another person must be applied only to the things that they can change. He can and he should deal with his rage because he just doesn't control himself, and we all must learn how to control ourselves. But the ability to eat with a spoon has to do with his physical nature that he can't change right now. And that's why this understanding of good manners as something that exists to make our lives more convenient is, I think, very sophisticated and beautiful of her. And also it shows that she cares about the beast, at least to some extent, because she doesn't want him to feel like there's something wrong with him.
Я думаю, що це дуже вишукано і дуже красиво з її боку, і також показує, що їй є якесь діло до чудовиська, тому що вона не хоче, щоб він почувався якимось таким не таким.
And we can take those two things as inspiration for our everyday life to differentiate where we should fight for the high standards of communication, where to be assertive, but in a kind way still, and to lead first of all with our own example, and where to be more tolerant to other people and to the things that they can change.
А де проявляти гнучкість і якусь таку толерантність до іншої людини?
However, even though I wish I could just say that we all have to look up to Belle, and I really say this, and I believe that it would be good, sometimes we have to follow the example of the beast. The beast understands that he must change, because if he doesn't change, then his curse will never end and no one will ever be able to love him. For most of us it's not that extreme, but still sometimes we are beasts to some people, and it's not always unjustified. That's why I think that the ability to change, to listen to people around us and understand what they need from us is also essential, because I feel like one of the sides of toxicity is that you don't want to change, that you don't want to listen to the other person. I don't know if it's the actual definition of toxicity or if the actual definition of toxicity includes that, but that's how I see it. And because the beast wants to change, he can change. So this relationship, I believe, though isn't exactly normal, still has some hope. And of course, it's only that simple because we are talking about a fairy tale right now. It would have been more complicated in real life. So, to sum up, quarantine in Belle's style is reading a lot, having a structured self-education routine, making makeshift friends for yourself, and also exercising the high culture of communication and trying to establish who you are today. Are you beauty or the beast? Because really this title is about all of us. Everyone is both the beauty and the beast, and it all depends on who we happen to be in every particular situation and who we choose to be in our life. That's about it. I think that if this quarantine lasts longer, I will be making some more videos on how to be a princess in isolation, because Disney has a lot of material, and if it ends soon, which I'm hoping for, I may make some other videos about Disney princesses on different topics, because there are a lot of things we can talk about. So, thank you, stay safe, and goodbye.